Nobody knew that Bill Gates was about to reveal the most terrifying plan for global financial control to Donald Trump. The encrypted message arrived at 3:17 a.m. on a cold February morning, sent through a communication system so secure it made government channels look like child's toys. Trump was in his Mar-a-Lago study, reviewing strategy documents for his upcoming campaign, when his most private device buzzed with an urgent alert. "Donald, this is Bill. I need to see you immediately. What I'm about to share will change everything you think you know about money, freedom, and the future of human civilization. They're not just planning to control our money. They're planning to control our lives through our money, and they're closer to success than anyone realizes." The message was unprecedented. Bill Gates and Donald Trump had been philosophical opponents for years, representing entirely different visions of American power and global influence. Gates was the tech philanthropist who had spent decades advocating for global cooperation and digital innovation. Trump was the populist leader who had built his career challenging exactly the kind of globalist agenda that Gates represented. But something in the urgency of the message, the genuine fear barely concealed behind the clinical language, convinced Trump this wasn't political maneuvering. Gates wasn't the type to engage in conspiracy theories or dramatic revelations. If he was reaching out in secret, if he was willing to risk everything to deliver this information, whatever he had discovered was both real and catastrophic. 8 hours later, Gates's unmarked private jet touched down at a secure airfield in central Florida. No flight records existed. No customs inspections were conducted. The world's most famous tech billionaire stepped off the aircraft looking haggard, exhausted, like a man who had discovered something that fundamentally challenged everything he believed about the world. They met in Trump's most secure conference room, a facility designed to prevent any form of surveillance or monitoring. Gates arrived carrying a specially designed briefcase that required multiple layers of security to open, biometric scans, encrypted passwords, and what appeared to be quantum-encrypted storage devices. "Bill," Trump said, noting the profound change in Gates's usually composed demeanor, "you look like you've seen a ghost. What's this emergency about?" Gates opened the briefcase with trembling hands, revealing documents, encrypted hard drives, and technical schematics that made Trump's blood run cold. "Donald, for 15 years I thought I was helping develop financial technology that would bring banking services to the world's poorest people. I thought we were creating systems to help the unbanked, to reduce poverty, to democratize access to financial services. But I just discovered we've been building the infrastructure for the most comprehensive system of human control in history." But the shocking part was yet to come. The documents Gates had brought weren't just technical specifications or development plans. They were detailed blueprints for what insiders called the financial control grid, a global digital currency system designed not to facilitate commerce, but to monitor, control, and ultimately dictate every aspect of human behavior through financial manipulation. "Look at this," Gates said, pulling out technical documents that showed the true architecture of what the public knew as central bank digital currencies. "This isn't about making payments more convenient or efficient. It's about creating a system where every purchase, every transaction, every financial decision can be monitored, approved, or denied by unelected bureaucrats." The system was far more sophisticated than anything the public had been told. Every digital transaction would be tracked in real time, analyzed by artificial intelligence systems, and cross-referenced with social credit scores, political affiliations, health records, and behavioral profiles. The currency wouldn't just record what people bought, it would predict what they would buy, influence what they were allowed to buy, and ultimately control what they could do with their own money. "They've been testing this system in China for years," Gates continued, showing Trump surveillance data that made his skin crawl. "But China was just the prototype. The real goal is global implementation, and they're using my foundation's research to perfect the technology." The Chinese beta test had been horrifyingly effective. Citizens who criticized the government found their digital wallets frozen. People who associated with dissidents couldn't access public transportation. Individuals who consumed inappropriate media discovered they could no longer purchase certain foods or services. The digital currency had become a tool for social engineering on a scale that made traditional authoritarianism look primitive. "Bill, this sounds like something out of a dystopian novel," Trump said, studying the behavioral modification data. "Are you telling me they can actually control people's behavior through their money?" "Not can control," Gates replied, his voice hollow. "Are controlling, and they're preparing to expand it globally within the next 18 months. The global implementation plan was breathtaking in its scope and ambition. Every major central bank had been secretly developing digital currency infrastructure that would eventually replace physical cash entirely. Once the transition was complete, every financial transaction would require government approval, every purchase would be subject to algorithmic oversight, and economic freedom would cease to exist. And this is where everything changed. But the true horror of the system wasn't just its surveillance capabilities, it was its behavior modification features. The digital currency had been designed to gradually change human behavior by making certain choices more expensive, certain products unavailable, and certain associations financially impossible. They call it nudge architecture, Gates explained, showing Trump psychological research that made his stomach turn. They can make people change their behavior without them even realizing they're being manipulated. Want to discourage people from eating meat? Make meat purchases slightly more expensive every week. Want to prevent people from traveling? Make transportation costs variable based on your travel history and social credit score. The system could influence everything from voting patterns to social relationships. People who associated with politically undesirable individuals would find their transaction fees increasing. Citizens who consumed inappropriate media would discover certain services becoming mysteriously unavailable to them. Even romantic relationships could be manipulated by making it more expensive for certain people to meet or date. The most terrifying part, Gates continued, is that most people won't even notice it's happening. They'll think they're making free choices, but every choice will be subtly influenced by financial incentives they don't understand. The psychological research was decades in the making. Teams of behavioral economists, social psychologists, and data scientists had studied how financial incentives could be used to modify human behavior on a massive scale. They had discovered that small, gradual changes in cost and availability could reshape entire populations without triggering conscious resistance. "Look at this data from the Chinese pilot program," Gates said, showing Trump behavioral modification statistics that were both impressive and horrifying. They reduced alcohol consumption by 34% without banning alcohol. They increased exercise rates by 28% without mandating fitness. They changed voting patterns by 15% without openly suppressing political speech, all through subtle manipulation of financial incentives. Trump studied the data, recognizing the implications. This wasn't just about money, it was about free will itself. If governments could manipulate behavior through financial systems, if they could make certain choices artificially expensive or unavailable, then democracy and individual liberty became meaningless concepts. "Why are you showing me this?" Trump asked. "Why not take this to the FBI or expose it publicly yourself?" Gates pulled out another set of documents that made Trump's blood run cold. "Because the people implementing this system include FBI officials, Treasury Department executives, Federal Reserve governors, and White House advisors from both parties. This isn't some external conspiracy. It's being built by the system itself. You haven't even seen the biggest surprise yet. The most shocking revelation was still to come. The digital currency control system wasn't just being developed by financial institutions and government agencies. It was being coordinated by a small group of tech executives, central bankers, and international organizations who had been planning this transformation for over 2 decades. "I've been part of it without knowing it," Gates admitted, his voice carrying profound shame and regret. "My foundation's digital identity research, our financial inclusion programs, our work on biometric identification, it's all been integrated into this control system. They've been using my credibility and resources to build the infrastructure for global financial tyranny." The coordination was breathtaking in its scope. The World Economic Forum had been hosting secret meetings to coordinate implementation timelines. The International Monetary Fund had been pressuring developing nations to adopt digital currency systems. Major tech companies had been quietly building the surveillance infrastructure needed to monitor every transaction. Even cryptocurrencies weren't what we thought they were, Gates continued, showing Trump technical analyses that shattered popular assumptions. Bitcoin, Ethereum, all the major cryptocurrencies, they were created and promoted to get people comfortable with digital money. Once everyone accepted the concept of non-physical currency, they could replace decentralized cryptocurrencies with centralized government systems. The strategy had been brilliant in its deception. By allowing cryptocurrencies to flourish temporarily, the architects of the control system had convinced people that digital money meant freedom and innovation. In reality, cryptocurrencies had been a Trojan horse designed to normalize the concept of money existing only as data that could be monitored and controlled. The transition timeline is aggressive, Gates explained, showing Trump implementation schedules that sent chills down his spine. Cash will be phased out gradually over the next 5 years. First, they'll make cash transactions increasingly inconvenient and expensive. Then they'll claim cash is being used for illegal activities and needs to be restricted. Finally, they'll eliminate it entirely for public safety reasons. The phase-out plan was already underway. Banks were reducing cash services, businesses were being incentivized to accept only digital payments, and government agencies were beginning to restrict cash transactions above certain amounts. Within 5 years, according to the timeline, physical money would be completely eliminated from most developed nations. But Donald, there's something else, Gates said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The system isn't just designed to control financial behavior. It's designed to control everything. Wait a second. Don't miss this detail. The digital currency system had been integrated with a comprehensive social control infrastructure that would make China's social credit system look primitive by comparison. Every digital transaction would be automatically cross-referenced with health records, travel patterns, social media activity, consumer preferences, and political affiliations to create real-time behavioral profiles of every citizen. They call it total life monitoring, Gates explained, showing Trump technical specifications that read like science fiction. The digital currency is just the entry point. Once they control your money, they can control your health care, your transportation, your housing, your employment, even your personal relationships. The system would know more about individuals than they knew about themselves. AI algorithms would analyze spending patterns to predict health problems, relationship issues, political opinions, and career changes before people were consciously aware of them. This information would then be used to guide behavior through targeted financial incentives and restrictions. Imagine a world where your bank account knows you're getting sick before you do and automatically restricts your travel to prevent you from spreading illness, Gates continued. Or where your digital wallet detects that you're consuming extremist content and gradually makes it more expensive for you to access transportation, housing, or employment until you change your media consumption habits. The behavioral modification capabilities extended to every aspect of human existence. The system could influence career choices by making certain industries more or less financially accessible to specific individuals. It could manipulate social relationships by making it expensive for certain people to meet or communicate. It could even control reproduction by making child-related expenses variable based on social credit scores and genetic profiles. The scariest part, Gates said, is that most people will never realize they're being controlled. They'll think they're making free choices, but every choice will be subtly influenced by financial incentives they don't understand are artificial. Trump walked to the window, staring out at the ocean while processing the implications of what Gates had revealed. How long do we have before this becomes unstoppable? 18 months, Gates replied. Maybe less. The infrastructure is already being built. The legal frameworks are being put in place. The pilot programs are being expanded. Once they flip the switch and mandate digital currency adoption, there's no going back. What you've seen so far is nothing. But the digital control system was just the beginning. Gates revealed that the same organizations developing the financial control grid were simultaneously working on what they called the Internet of Bodies, a network that would connect every human being to the digital monitoring system through mandatory biometric devices. They're not just planning to control your money, Gates explained, showing Trump medical device specifications that made his blood run cold. They're planning to control your body. Mandatory health monitoring devices that will track your location, your vital signs, your emotional state, even your thoughts and intentions. The devices would be introduced gradually as health innovations and safety measures. First, they would be optional fitness trackers and medical monitors. Then, they would become required for employment, travel, and access to government services. Finally, they would be surgically implanted and impossible to remove. The justification will be public health and safety, Gates continued. They'll claim these devices prevent disease outbreaks, reduce crime, and protect national security. But the real purpose is to create a population that can be monitored and controlled at the cellular level. The technical capabilities were far beyond what most people realized was possible. The devices could monitor brain activity, detect emotional states, track social interactions, and even influence behavior through targeted electromagnetic stimulation. They would turn every human being into a node in a global surveillance and control network. Combined with the digital currency system, Gates explained, these devices would give governments unprecedented control over human behavior. They could literally prevent people from thinking certain thoughts, feeling certain emotions, or taking certain actions. The integration between financial control and biological monitoring would be seamless and total. If someone's biometric devices detected inappropriate thoughts or emotions, their digital wallet could be automatically restricted. If they attempted to engage in unauthorized activities, their financial access could be immediately suspended. This isn't just about political control, Gates emphasized. This is about redefining what it means to be human. Once they can monitor and control our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors in real-time, free will becomes an illusion. Trump turned from the window, his expression grim. Bill, why are you telling me this? Why risk everything to warn me? Because I helped create this monster, Gates replied, his voice heavy with regret. And because you might be the only person with enough independent influence to help me stop it. You won't believe what happened next. The plan Gates proposed was as audacious as it was dangerous. Using Trump's upcoming rally tour as a platform, they would expose the digital currency control system before it could be fully implemented. But the strategy required perfect timing and coordination, because once the architects of the system realized they had been exposed, they would accelerate their timeline and implement emergency measures to silence opposition. We start with your rally in Texas next week, Gates explained, laying out a comprehensive exposure strategy. You announce that you have evidence of the biggest threat to American freedom in history. That creates immediate national attention and forces mainstream media to cover the story, even if they try to debunk it. Simultaneously, I'll release all the technical documentation through my social media platforms and personal networks. We flood the information space with evidence before they can coordinate a suppression campaign. The timing had to be perfect. Trump would make the announcement during his rally, creating massive public attention. Gates would release the technical evidence online during the speech, giving people immediate access to the documentation. Then, they would coordinate follow-up appearances on every independent media platform they could access. The key is speed and volume, Gates emphasized. Once we start this revelation, we have maybe 24 hours before they coordinate their response. We need to get the information to as many people as possible before they can shut down our communication channels. But the plan carried enormous risks for both men. Trump would be exposing himself to accusations that he was promoting dangerous conspiracy theories. Gates would be destroying his relationships with every major institution he had worked with for decades. If this fails, Gates warned, if people don't believe the evidence, or if the system successfully discredits us, Both of our legacies will be destroyed. But if we succeed, we might prevent the establishment of the most comprehensive tyranny in human history. Trump studied the technical documents one more time, recognizing that this decision would define not just his political future, but the future of human freedom itself. What's the first step? We start building an alternative, Gates replied. While we're exposing their system, we need to offer people a different option. A truly decentralized financial system that can't be controlled by governments or corporations. Just when they thought it was over. 5 days later, at a packed rally in Austin, Texas, Trump stepped up to the podium knowing that the next 30 minutes would determine whether humanity maintained its financial freedom or descended into digital slavery. The crowd was electric, energized by rumors that something unprecedented was planned, but they had no idea they were about to witness the most important speech in modern history. "My fellow Americans," Trump began, his voice carrying across the arena and through live streams to millions of viewers worldwide, "Tonight I'm going to tell you about a threat to your freedom that most of you have never heard of. A threat so sophisticated, so comprehensive, that it makes every dictatorship in history look amateur." The crowd fell silent, sensing the gravity in his tone. This wasn't his usual campaign speech. This was something different, something that transcended politics. For 20 years, a small group of global elites has been building a system to control every aspect of your life through your money. They want to eliminate cash, force you to use digital currency that they control, and monitor every purchase you make, every place you go, every person you associate with. As Trump spoke, Gates was simultaneously releasing thousands of technical documents through his social media accounts, his foundation's website, and every digital platform he could access. The evidence was overwhelming: system architectures, behavioral modification research, implementation timelines, and communication logs proving that the digital currency control system was real and operational. Tonight, with the help of someone who helped build this system and now wants to stop it, we're exposing the greatest threat to human freedom ever devised, Trump continued. Bill Gates has risked everything to bring you this evidence because he believes, as I do, that your freedom is worth more than any technological convenience. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Social media platforms struggled under the weight of people trying to access the documents. News outlets scrambled to respond to a story that challenged the fundamental assumptions of modern financial systems. The carefully maintained secrecy around the digital currency control system began to crumble under the pressure of exposure. But the real test was just beginning. The voice on the phone was familiar, but within 2 hours of the rally, Trump's secure phone rang with a call from the highest levels of the Federal Reserve. The voice on the other end was calm, but carried unmistakable menace. "Mr. Trump," the caller said, "what you and Mr. Gates did tonight was not just irresponsible. It was treasonous. You've exposed national security operations that took decades to develop. The consequences will be severe. The threat was both personal and systemic. The financial institutions implementing the digital currency system had resources that went far beyond government authority. They could manipulate markets, crash currencies, and destroy individual finances with algorithmic precision. You have 48 hours to retract your statements and discredit the evidence," the voice continued. "If you don't, we'll demonstrate exactly how much control we already have over the financial system." The warning was followed by immediate action. Stock markets opened the next morning with coordinated sell-offs targeting companies associated with Trump and Gates. Digital payment systems experienced technical difficulties that prevented access to accounts. Social media platforms began restricting the spread of the documentary evidence, claiming it violated terms of service. But something unexpected happened. Instead of being suppressed, the revelation gained momentum. Independent researchers began verifying details from the technical documents. Financial experts started confirming the existence of the control systems. Government whistleblowers came forward with additional evidence of digital currency manipulation. Even the strongest man once faced a moment like this. The exposure of the digital currency control system triggered a global awakening about the relationship between money and freedom. Citizens around the world realized that the financial systems they depended on were being weaponized against them. The response was swift and decisive. Major cryptocurrencies experienced massive adoption as people sought alternatives to government-controlled digital currencies. Local communities began establishing barter systems and alternative currencies. Businesses started accepting precious metals and other physical assets to avoid digital monitoring. Most importantly, the political response was immediate and bipartisan. Legislators who had never agreed on anything found common ground in opposing financial tyranny. Emergency bills were introduced to prevent the elimination of cash, ban mandatory digital currency adoption, and protect financial privacy. What we accomplished, Gates said during a joint interview with Trump 6 months later, wasn't just exposing a conspiracy. We reminded people that money is supposed to serve them, not control them. Trump nodded in agreement. For too long, a small group of unelected technocrats thought they could redesign human civilization to serve their vision of order and control. We proved that free people won't accept digital slavery, no matter how convenient it's made to seem. The partnership between Trump and Gates had shocked observers across the political spectrum, but it had achieved something that neither could have accomplished alone. By combining populist political energy with technical expertise and insider knowledge, they had prevented the implementation of the most comprehensive control system in human history. What would you have done in his place? The revelation had consequences that extended far beyond American politics. Similar digital currency control systems were exposed and dismantled in other countries. International agreements were signed protecting financial privacy and preventing the elimination of physical money. New technologies were developed to ensure that digital transactions could remain truly private and decentralized. Most importantly, the exposure had reminded people that freedom requires constant vigilance. The most dangerous threats to liberty often come disguised as convenience, efficiency, or safety. Citizens who had become complacent about gradually increasing government control realized that their freedom was not guaranteed and required active protection. Standing together at a press conference 1 year after their revelation, Trump and Gates represented something unprecedented in American politics: the successful collaboration between populist and technocratic forces to defend democratic values against authoritarian innovation. This wasn't about Republican versus Democrat, Trump explained to the assembled reporters. This was about freedom versus control, about human dignity versus algorithmic management, about preserving the right to make our own choices with our own money. Gates added, "What we learned is that technology is not neutral. It can be used to enhance human freedom or to eliminate it. The choice is ours, but only if we remain aware of what's being built in our name." Everyone thought the truth was revealed, but the real shock was, 2 years after exposing the digital currency control system, investigative journalists uncovered evidence that the conspiracy had been even more extensive than originally revealed. The architects of the financial control grid had been coordinating with social media companies, healthcare systems, and educational institutions to create what they called total life architecture, a comprehensive system for managing human behavior from birth to death. "We weren't just facing financial control," Gates said during a follow-up documentary. "We were facing the complete reorganization of human society around algorithmic management of individual behavior." The additional revelations showed that the digital currency system had been just one component of a larger social engineering project. Children's educational outcomes would have been tied to their parents' financial behavior. Healthcare access would have been determined by social credit scores derived from spending patterns. Even romantic relationships would have been influenced by algorithmic matching based on financial compatibility. What they wanted to create, Trump said, wasn't just a cashless society. It was a choiceless society, where every aspect of human life was predetermined by artificial intelligence systems designed to optimize social outcomes rather than individual freedom. The partnership between Trump and Gates had prevented more than financial tyranny. They had preserved the fundamental human right to make mistakes, to choose poorly, to live imperfectly free lives rather than perfectly managed ones. Their unlikely alliance had proven that when the stakes were high enough, People who disagreed on almost everything could still work together to defend the principles that made disagreement possible. They had demonstrated that freedom required not just political vigilance, but technological awareness and the courage to reject innovations that promised convenience at the cost of liberty. The most dangerous plan in financial history had been stopped not through traditional political processes or regulatory oversight, but through the courage of two people who were willing to risk everything to preserve human freedom in the digital age.